What's up, folks? How's it going? This is Watch. Hope you guys are all doing well. And this is the all-new 10.2-inch iPad. This is the standard iPad that's replacing the 9.7-inch that has been around for a few generations. It starts at around $329, and namely, there's definitely going to be a lot of confusion because this iPad pretty much looks identical to the iPad Apple released a few months back, which was the iPad Air 3rd generation. Now, before we get into the major differences between the two iPads and which one's generally better, I just want to talk about our sponsor that made this video possible, ESRgear.com. And if you're interested in protecting your new generation iPads, whether that's the 10.2-inch version, the Air, or the Pro iPad, they have awesome tempered glass screen protectors as well as folio cases that not only protect your iPad front to back, but also have a built-in stand capabilities. They just recently launched a new lineup of cases specifically designed for the 10.2-inch iPad, including this slim, low-profile pink case, this black Trifold smart case, as well as my favorite, the all-new Rebound Pencil Slim smart case. All the cutouts for the ports, camera, buttons are all super precise, specifically designed for the 7th generation iPad. Externally, it has a rugged yet smooth rubber-like finish, a soft interior lining. You also have a built-in slot for the 1st generation Apple Pencil, so that way you actually have a place where you can store this thing, because I'm losing it all the time, so very handy and convenient there. Lastly, if you're interested in protecting the screen itself, I would definitely recommend checking out the tempered glass screen protector that ESR has to offer. It's super easy to install, scratch resistant as well as fingerprint resistant, so it's going to keep your iPad looking great and still be protected at the same time. For more information, check out the description down below. We want to give a huge shout out for ESRgear.com for making this content possible. Now, coming back to our main comparison with the new generation iPads, let's talk about price first. Now, the starting price on the iPad Air is about $170 more at around $499, and that's a pretty big difference considering the fact that these two almost look identical. Now, interestingly, from a dimensional standpoint, they are identical. They both measure around 250 millimeters by 174 millimeters. There is a difference in terms of thickness. The Air still retains the name, and it is a slightly lighter as well. So you're looking about 6.1 millimeters on the Air versus 7.5 millimeters in terms of the standard 10.2-inch iPad thickness. And in terms of the weight, the Wi-Fi models that we have over here weigh around 483 grams for the standard iPad versus the Air is around 456 grams. Not a whole lot lighter, and you're not going to really notice the difference when you're physically holding both devices in the hand. Now, the display is actually probably the biggest difference between the two. Not only do we have a slightly larger display on the Air while still retaining the same size, which results in a higher screen-to-body ratio. You can see that we have thinner bezels on the side of the device on the Air. They're both using LCD IPS technology, and we do have a higher PPI count and a higher overall resolution on the Air, but not by a significant margin. They're pretty much very similar in terms of overall pixel density, about 265 PPI on the Air versus about 264 PPI on the standard iPad. They're both pretty much the same in terms of overall screen brightness. We're around 500 CDM squared. Now, the Air also has DCI P3 as well as True Tone certification, so it's supposed to be a little bit wider in terms of its color gamut. But based on our side-by-side test, to my eyes, there isn't a huge difference in terms of overall color quality, rendition, and accuracy from what I can see at this point. And basically on the Air, you're getting slightly thinner bezels, slightly larger display, but from a quality standpoint, I think the standard iPad 10.2-inch is pretty much 99% identical. Now, probably the biggest distinction between the two is actually the internal processing capabilities. We're using the previous generation Apple A10 Fusion processor. That's a quad-core chip with 2 performance cores, 2 high-efficiency cores on the 10.2-inch standard iPad versus the new generation Air is using Apple A12 Bionic. That's a 6-core processor with 2 performance cores and 4 high-efficiency cores, as well as a faster Apple-specific GPU. Now, in terms of long-term storage and RAM memory, both have 3 gigabytes of RAM, and the Air comes in generally higher capacity, starting at 64 gigabytes, going up to 256 gigabytes, versus the standard Air starts at 32 gigabytes and goes up to 128 gigs of long-term storage. Now, in terms of performance tests for benchmark specific, if you take a look at both the Antutu and Geekbench results that we have over here, you can see that we're getting significantly higher performance with the new A12 Bionic on the iPad Air compared to the A10 on the standard iPad. What does this mean in terms of real life? Well, if you are going to be doing any kind of video editing, any kind of multimedia-based application stuff, you're definitely going to probably want to stick to the Air, especially if you're going to be using it as a laptop replacement. And by the way, both of these two work with the Apple Pencil as well as the Apple keyboard, so you can use them as laptop replacements. And for everyday standard computing, like using the Microsoft Office suite, Word, Excel, perhaps editing some PDFs, email, surfing the web, consuming media, that's perfectly doable on the standard iPad. But as soon as you start introducing any kind of multimedia-based applications that utilize a lot of system resources, you're definitely going to struggle quite a bit compared to the iPad Air and indeed the iPad Pro. Now, in terms of the camera configuration, both are using the exact same 8 megapixel camera for stills. They can both shoot 1080p at 30 FPS, no 4K capabilities at this point, but there is a pretty huge difference in terms of the front-facing side. We're using a 7 megapixel f2.2 31mm lens on the iPad Air, which can shoot 1080p at 30 FPS, versus Apple decided to save a decent amount of money and use the old potato 1.2 megapixel camera. It can only shoot at 720p at 30 FPS, and both in terms of stills and video is far behind the 7 megapixel camera that we have on the iPad Air. So if you're going to do a lot of FaceTiming and things like that, Skype calls, definitely better to go with the iPad Air compared to the standard iPad. Now, interestingly, in terms of battery capacity, both are technically rated for 10 hours of surfing the web or consuming media, but the actual capacity is actually 900 or so milliamp hours larger on the standard iPad compared to the iPad Air. That's probably due to the fact that they probably want to make it a little bit thinner in terms of volume, so they put a smaller battery on the Air compared to the standard iPad. But in most regards, you can probably expect it anywhere between an hour to two more battery life. Based on a couple of initial discharge tests, I did find that the standard iPad lasts about an hour to an hour and a half more on average compared to the third generation Air. So in more cases than not, you're probably going to get slightly better battery performance, 5-10% more with that larger battery capacity, even though the processor may not be as battery efficient. Now, in summary, if you're in the market for a new iPad and debating between the Air versus the standard 10.2-inch edition, I think if you do want to save the $170 or so, there's some great characteristics with the standard iPad that matches the experience that you're going to get with the iPad Air. For example, if you're going to be consuming a lot of media, there's really not a big difference between the two, as we've discussed. But if you want something a little bit more powerful, perhaps replacing a laptop or something like that, going to be doing some multimedia work, the Air definitely has its advantages from an internal perspective compared to the standard 10.2-inch iPad. But even with that regard, from a pure value perspective, for under $330, you're 98% identical to the iPad Air, and that's definitely the best deal for a brand new iPad that's currently available right now. But really, other than that, guys, that's really it for this video. Make sure you have post notifications turned on so you get our videos once they become available, and we'll see you real soon. Take care.